guys, it's me Catherine, and today I'm going to be talking about everyone's favourite warlock, Magnus Bane. I recently finished the Bane Chronicles by Cassandra Clare, which is a collection of stories revolving around Magnus Bane, whom we all know and love, at least most of us do. And I was always going to love the Bane Chronicles because Magnus. I love Magnus, and it's so nice to see more of where Magnus has been and the experiences that he's had, the friendships that he's made and the loves that he's had in his life, and seeing how that has shaped the Magnus that we know from the Mortal Instruments. And overall, I really enjoyed. I enjoyed more or less every story. There were the odd one or two that were just a bit meh, and one that I definitely wanted more from. But on the whole, I really enjoyed this. So if you are a fan of Magnus Bane and you haven't picked up the Bane Chronicles yet, then I suggest you do. And that is really all I can say without spoiling anything. So if you haven't read it, then I'm going to say goodbye now. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in my next video. And on to the spoilers. So the first story is called What Really Happened in Peru, and we all know Magnus has been banned from Peru, but we have no idea why. So we're reading through this story and it's talking about all the adventures that he's had, his failed attempt at the pirate life, the desecration of a sacred temple, his failed romance with a young charango player, and we see all this and at the end of every event that happened in Peru, it's like, but this is not why Magnus was banned. And then you get to the end and it just says that the Peruvian warlocks got together and told Magnus that he wasn't allowed in Peru anymore, but they didn't give him a reason, no matter how much he asked. So not only do we not know why Magnus has been banned from Peru, but Magnus has no idea why he was banned from Peru. I mean, talk about disappointment. You read what really happened in Peru, you read through all that, and we don't find out. What we do see, however, is Magnus with friends, because both in the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments series, Magnus seems to be a bit of a loner. But here we see him with Ragnarfell and Katarina Loss, and seeing their friendship, and it was just so nice to see, because they've been friends for hundreds of years, and you can tell that they've been friends for a long time because they just have that no-nonsense attitude. Like, when Magnus gets his heart broken because Imas breaks up with him, his dear charango player, Magnus takes it very hard and gets absolutely smashed and decides it's a great idea to enchant a carpet and flies it out to the desert, where he decides that there's going to be a cactus, and Katarina and Ragnar, being the good friends that they are, chase him across the desert to try and bring him back to his senses. And while they obviously feel for him and his heartbrokenness, when he wakes up with the mother of all hangovers, they have zero sympathy, and I don't blame them, because I don't have sympathy anyway for people who are hungover, because it's self-inflicted. I don't expect sympathy when I'm hungover, so I don't give sympathy to people who are hungover. But I would definitely not feel any sympathy if they had dragged me across the desert, like basically dragged them halfway across Peru. I don't know how big Peru is, but he basically takes them on a wild goose chase the entire night, and they get their own back with that weird healer with the guinea pigs, which was a bit strange. It's just nice seeing Magnus with friends, and friends that are going to help him out, and not him being constantly pestered to help the Shadowhunters out. And you don't see as much with Ragnar as you do with Katarina, because Ragnar's not that kind of person, but he still pops up to see Magnus every now and again, and when Magnus phones telling him it's an emergency, Ragnar is more than willing to drop whatever he was doing at that moment and get over to him as soon as he could. Obviously that emergency turned out not to be a real emergency, because it was just for Alex's birthday present, but still. But Katarina, you see Katarina at the end of the fall of the Hotel de Mort, after the whole incident with Camille and the drugs, and Magnus seeing her reduced to such a state, and because he loved Camille, it was too hard for him, and he couldn't take it. And it was horrible to see actually as well, because we know obviously Camille is very beautiful and she's charming, and she has this she's sort of like a bit of like a queen really, and that is what Magnus knows. That's what Magnus loved about her, and to see her reduced to that, it was obviously too hard for him. And when he asked Katerina to remove his memory, obviously she asks him if he's sure, and that she's not sure that she can do it, and Magnus is like, well, if you don't do it, I'll do it myself. So she does it for him, and then 5 minutes later, when the memory's gone and he has no recollection of why he's asked Katerina there, why Katerina's shown up, she already has this story all worked out, and she stays with him, and they have pizza and drinks and chat and things. And just that being there for friends, that, to me, that friendship it's beautiful. And it was also nice to see Magnus and Tessa together as friends after Will's gone and Tessa is alone because her family's basically dying, and just to see that she still has Magnus and those two are still friends, they still hang out and things. It was just so nice to see Magnus in that way, not being summoned for his magic or whatever. It was just nice to see that friends, really. It's also nice to see him encountering people that we don't know, but we know, if that makes any sense. So in Vampire Scones and Edmund Herondale, obviously Magnus meets Edmund Herondale, who is Will's dad, and he also meets who will become Will's mother. And when we meet Edmund, he basically drops out of the sky and asks Magnus if he wants to hang out. You know, they go to a tavern, a pub or whatever, and partake in a bit of gambling and some alcoholic beverages, and they're just chatting and having a good time. And then obviously they come upon that, they hear that screaming, and they come upon the carriage that's been attacked by the demon or whatever, and Edmund jumps into action like using his Shadowhunter skills to save the day. Magnus obviously helps a little bit, and who should be in the carriage but, I've forgotten her name, but Will's mother, a Welsh woman who has come to London in search of a husband. And this woman, I'm sad that we didn't get to see more of her, we just basically saw that bit of her, but she takes no nonsense, and Edmund falls for her. He falls in love with her, and he gives up being a Shadowhunter for that and has his marks removed. And we also at that point see how cruel the Shadowhunters can be, how heartless and how cold they are. We know they're hard, we know that they're not a warm and fuzzy people, are the Shadowhunters, but when the screams of Edmund are ringing out through the entire institute and they don't bat an eyelid, Magnus, it's so hard for Magnus to hear that he wants to go help him, but they're like, no, you cannot go help him, it's his choice. He was the one that decided he wanted to leave and marry a mundane. You know, we feel it's like zero sympathy, and seeing how cruel they are, it's hard. Like, how can they be, because the people in the institute practically raised Edmund, and they just feel absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like, they don't understand how he could throw his life away for a mundane. He deserves everything he gets. That's horrible. That's horrible. Shadowhunters aren't very nice people, at least the older generation. The newer generation seem to be a bit better, but the older generation, like, they're horrible. Horrible people. And obviously Edmund Herondale is not the only Herondale that Magnus ever meets in his life. We know about Will and his family, and we also meet James Herondale, who is Tessa and Will's son. Magnus is at some kind of like casino gambling place for downworlders, and James Herondale is just a young boy who stands up in the middle of the room with a gun and fires at the chandelier because somebody, probably Ragnar, bet him to do it. And Magnus instantly recognises the features of the Herondales that he's come to know so well, and obviously goes to see what the hell's wrong with him because the kid's obviously drunk and there's obviously something troubling him, and Magnus spends the entire night with him trying to coax it out of him, like, what's wrong, why are you doing this, and all he gets nothing from him except a murmured word, grace, and obviously that means nothing to Magnus. And so the early hours of the morning he rocks up at the London Institute with an unconscious James Herondale in his arms, and we obviously meet Tessa and Will again, and they are baffled by their son's actions because they can't understand why he would do this. He's always been such a nice, quiet boy, you know, loves his books and his reading. They don't understand why he's doing what he's doing, and he won't tell Magnus, and Magnus is not going to try and force it out of him. So Magnus leaves and goes about his business, and he's been offered a job by none other than Tatiana Blackthorne, the sister of Gideon and Gabriel Lightwood, whose husband, unfortunately, was eaten by her father, who turned into a giant worm because he had demon pox, and he had to be put down by Will and Gideon and Gabriel and Jem. And she's not quite right in the head because, and on top of that, her son also died because he was very weak. He didn't survive his first, from what I gathered, he didn't survive his first rune, and so she's kind of adopted this young girl who's the one to greet Magnus when he goes to the Blackthorn, the old Lightwood estate mansion place. And it turns out this young girl who reminds Magnus of Camille because she's so beautiful and so charming, but she's kind of cold and dead inside. And this young girl is called Grace, and suddenly Magnus knows what's wrong with James. He has, unfortunately, fallen for this young girl who doesn't have the capacity to love him back, and it broke him basically, because growing up he'd been the only love he'd ever known was the friendly, fluffy love of his family, and he's seen the love between his mum and his dad, and that's what the kind of love he expected to find out in the world. But sadly, his first outside family experience of love was with this Grace, this doll basically, and it broke him, and that's all we get. That's all we get. Magnus turns down the job offer that Tatiana was willing to pay him for because it was to kill some Shadowhunters or something, do really, really dark magic. And Magnus was like, nope, not having none of that crazy. And he leaves. And that's it. This was a story I wanted more from. Like, you can't just leave that there. Like, what happened to James? He couldn't have just stayed broken. Did he find somebody to help him fix that broken heart, to help him become whole again? But we don't find out. We don't find out. It's just Magnus realises that that's what's wrong with James. He decides not to tell Tessa and Will because it's not his place to do so, and that's it. That's all we get. That is all we get, and I wanted more from that. I wanted a lot more from that story. It wasn't long enough. It needed more. I needed more. One thing I was really wanted to read was the saving of Raphael Santiago. So we know from the City of Heavenly Fire that Magnus saved Raphael's life, but we just don't know how or what took place. But we have this whole story in here for us, letting us know what happened. And it was at a time when Magnus decided he was going to be a private investigator, as you do, and Raphael's mother shows up asking Magnus, because she knows Magnus is special, and she asks him to save her son, who was part of a group of lads who went to go and stop this vampire who had been preying on the kids in the area, only none of them came back, and she wants Magnus to save him. And Magnus says he will. He says he will, so he goes to the Hotel du Mort where the vampires have taken up residence, and demands to see this vampire that's been preying on the kids. And he goes up and he sees this vampire feeding on a young boy, and he blasts him out of the way, runs to the young boy, but it's too late, the young boy's dead. So he demands to know if this young boy was Raphael Santiago, and the vampire laughs. He's like, you're here for Raphael Santiago. Turns out the vampire is Raphael, and he'd already killed the vampire that had been preying on the kids, and Raphael hates what he is. He's like, everybody, all his friends are dead, and he's like, and he is too. And there's this sun, I can't remember where it's coming from, but there's this sunlight coming into the room. Magnus sees what he's about to do, so before Raphael can throw himself into it, Magnus stops him, and Magnus then takes it upon himself to try and to save him from himself, I guess, to make Raphael realise that just because he's a vampire now doesn't make him a monster. It doesn't mean he deserves death. And so he takes Raphael in, and together they work to make it so that Magnus can take Raphael to see his mum, so that he doesn't have to tell his mum that his son's dead. And it was just, I really think this is probably one of my favourite stories out of the collection, definitely one of my favourites. And we see how hard Raphael works to be able to wear the cross chain that his mother got him, to be able to say the word God, to abstain from blood and be able to not jump on the first live person that he comes across so that he won't end up accidentally killing his family. And it's just seeing Magnus and Raphael were like living together, because Raphael just does not understand Magnus at all. Raphael is so, I don't even know, he's just great. I love Raphael and it's just brilliant. And then when Ragnar shows up, because we see Ragnar in this, again in this story, Ragnar shows up to see Magnus, and when he does, Raphael comes out to see who it is in wearing nothing but a bath towel, and Ragnar's reaction was brilliant. Ragnar squinted over at Raphael. Raphael looked balefully back at Ragnar. There was a certain tension in the air. "Oh, Magnus," said Ragnar, and he covered his eyes with one large green hand. "Oh, no, no." "What?" said Magnus, puzzled. Ragnar abruptly lowered his hand. "No, you're right, of course, I'm being silly. He's a vampire. He only looks 14. How old are you? I'm sure you're older than either of us." Raphael looked at Ragnar as if he was mad. Magnus found it quite refreshing to have someone else looked at that way for a change. "I'd be 16 by now," he said slowly. "Oh, Magnus," Ragnar wailed, "that's disgusting. How could you? Have you lost your mind?" "What?" Magnus asked again. "We agreed 18 was the cut-off age," said Ragnar. "You, I, and Katerina made a vow. Oh, wait. You think I'm dating Raphael?" Magnus asked. "Raphael? That's ridiculous. That's the most revolting idea I've ever heard." And I just think that moment was brilliant, just like, oh God, Magnus, no, what are you doing? And that's how Ragnar and Raphael became friends. They bonded over a mutual, I don't even know what to call it, because they don't hate Magnus. Obviously Magnus is great, they don't hate him, but they bond over their love of teasing Magnus and making fun of him and just being downright mean to him. And a beautiful friendship was born from that, which we know carries on, because in the story where Magnus is trying to think of what to give Alec for a birthday present, obviously he phones Ragnar to ask him. Katerina is not, she's like, "No, Magnus, I've got things to do." And he phones Ragnar to ask him what to get. I don't think Ragnar knew at the time that it was Alec, or Magnus had never told Ragnar that it was Alec, but we learned that Raphael told Ragnar that he was dating Alec, because those two, they keep in touch, which I think is cute. And how Raphael found out himself, I thought, was brilliant. That moment, it was kind of like the moment where Ragnar first sees Raphael at Magnus's place and he's just like, oh no. And when Raphael walks in to Taki's, where Magnus and Alec are on a date, they're going out for something to eat, and it's just, Alec was laughing, and then Raphael Santiago came in the door of the cafe with his most faithful vampire followers, Lily and Elliot. Raphael spotted Magnus and Alec, and then his thin arched eyebrows hit his hairline. "Nope, nope, nope, and also no," Raphael said, and he actually took several steps back towards the door. "Turn around, everybody. I do not wish to know this. I refuse to be aware of this." Obviously, he tries to leave, but his followers think it's amusing. They're like, "Oh, well, if it isn't one of the Nephilim." "Hi," said Alec. "Wait a minute," said Raphael. "Are you Alexander Lightwood?" Alec looked more panicked by the minute. "Yes," he said, as if he were uncertain on the subject. Magnus thought he might be considering changing his name to Horace Whipplepool and fleeing the country. "Aren't you 12? Raphael demanded. "I distinctly recall you being 12. That was a while ago," said Alec. "Just that, I distinctly remember you being 12. No, that was, I was 12 once, but not anymore." And obviously Raphael's, he doesn't want anything to do with it, but his cronies are still hounding them, and Magnus sees that Alec's getting uncomfortable, and you know, he starts to threaten them, and Raphael ran out of patience, which admittedly was like a desert running out of water. "Dios," snapped Raphael, and the other two vampires flinched. "I am not interested in your sordid encounters or constantly deranged life choices, and I am certainly not interested in prying into the affairs of Nephilim. I meant what I said. I don't want to know about this, and I won't know about this. This never happened. I saw nothing. Let's go." And then obviously the first thing Raphael did was report to Ragnar about what he'd seen, and it's just, I love Raphael and Ragnar, and it was nice getting to see more of, to actually see who Ragnar was in this, because all we know is that he was a friend of Magnus and he was killed. He gave the white book to Jocelyn, that's all we know, and he's dead before Clary ever gets to meet him. And so to see him and to find out that him, and to see him and Raphael being friends, it's beautiful. It is beautiful. And to it's lasted, and you find out that they corresponded frequently while they were alive. And it's sad because I keep forgetting that Raphael's also dead now. And the voicemail that Raphael leaves Magnus, which you see in the last part, which happens after Magnus has broken up with Alec, and he's got like loads of voicemail messages from Izzy threatening to break down his door and pretending to be Maurice and pretending to be a lawyer and also pretending to be the cat, Church. Alec phones up as well, but Raphael's message is just, "Greetings, Magnus Bane, High Warlock of Brooklyn, from Raphael Santiago of the New York Vampire Clan, loyal servant of our glorious Queen Maureen, forever may she reign in dark glory, and the future Prince Consort Simon, Babelicious Rock God. We have to begin all our telephone calls in this manner now, including our nightly call to a place called Hot Topic. It would be needless to state, after this introduction, that I consider myself a damned soul." But you can just imagine him, like, at that moment he's like, as soon as I hang up this phone call, I'm throwing myself into the sun. "I am contacting you because our Queen wished to send a summons to the shiny man who is Simon's friend." That is a quote. She adds that she supports you and she's a fan of much yaoi manga. I have no idea what that means, and I never wish to know. While I'm on the telephone, Lily happened to overhear some not terribly interesting conversation at Taki's between several melodramatic teenagers of your acquaintance. Imagine my surprise when I learned that the ill-advised relationship between yourself and an excessively young male Shadowhunter has been abruptly and unpleasantly concluded. I want to inform you that your esteemed colleague, Ragnar Fell, now owes me $10 due to a small bet that we made amongst ourselves on the subject of how that absurd liaison would end. Of course, Ragnar will never pay me my $10 because he was murdered by the Nephilim due to a conflict between Nephilim that downworlders were for some reason embroiled in. Just like the conflict we are currently having, so I suppose you could say that Ragnar died for nothing. Shadowhunters, could their new motto be something like, not worth the bother? That is why I love Raphael. We don't see enough of that in the Mortal Instruments series. I don't think we see any of that. It makes it sad. Because you see more of Ragnar, we see more of Raphael and their friendship, and it's sad to think that they're dead. That we'll never get that again. There's not going to be any more of that. I know I haven't talked about all the stories in detail, and there's lots that I've missed out, but I can't go without mentioning the Malik in the stories. Well, we get to see Magnus and Alec's first, and it turns out it was Alec that showed up on Magnus's doorstep asking Magnus out if he would like to go out. And Magnus says yes. He's an idiot. He thinks he's an idiot for saying yes, but he says yes. And Alec shows up late. He's been running so hard that he's sweating, and Magnus offers him a drink, but he's so nervous that he spills it all over himself. Bless his little cotton socks. He's just like, oh God. Oh God. And Magnus goes to get him a fresh t-shirt, and when he comes back out with the t-shirt in his hand, Alex stood there with he's already taken his t-shirt off and he stood there with it in his hands, and Magnus is like, oh. His head was bowed, his hair black as ink, his luminously pale skin white as paper. He looked like a piece of art. Chiaroscuro. I don't know what that is. Beautifully and wonderfully made. Magnus had heard the story of how the Nephilim were created many times. They had all left out the bit that said, and the angel descended from on high and gave his chosen ones fantastic abs. And that bit, it was just, obviously Alex feeling really down though, because he was late, he was really late for the day, and which the date he'd asked for, and then he spills a drink all over him, and he's like, I'm such a terrible date, and Magnus is like, what on earth, what are you talking about? You've only been here like 10 minutes and I've already got half your clothes off. And it was just poor Alec. Alex, the whole time he's just so adorable, because he's just so nervous and he's worried that this is going to go terribly, and it doesn't get much better. Because there's an incident with the pickpocket where Alec like slams him, and that was definitely not part of his plan. And then Magnus had decided to take them to a downworlder restaurant, where Alec is obviously not welcome, but Alec's like, no, this is fine, we'll get through this is cool. And the food's really good till they get to the pasta, because their waiter put way too much, I guess it's too spicy, too much spice on it, because werewolf rights. Then Magnus' ex comes in, throws wine in Magnus's face, and Magnus can see that this is going downhill very quickly, so he texts Katerina aboard there, because obviously he pre-planned that, but if things went sour he would text her that and she would phone with an emergency, and she does phone, only she has a real emergency. And he says, you know, he says to Alec, you know, I'm sorry, that was my friend, I've got to go, there's been an emergency. And Alec looks so heartbroken, he's like, oh my god, this is so bad, so bad. He had his friend phone him so that he could get out of it, and now it is going to be abandoned. And Magnus sees that, and I would as well, he just broke. He's like, you know what, do you want to come with me? Because there's a young werewolf who has gone out and she needs to be, you know, she needs to be taken care of. And Alec's like, oh, it's a real emergency. And then everything goes well from there, because Magnus gets to see Alec in action, and we see him be, like, he's forceful with her, the werewolf, I can't remember, Marcy. But at no point does he try to kill her or do anything but get her under control. And when she realises that he's a Shadowhunter, and she's like, oh god, what are you going to do to me? And he's like, I'm not gonna do anything, you can't help it, this is not your fault, no one was killed, no one was seriously hurt, I'm not going to do anything. And it's just nice to see Alec outside of everybody else. He's kind of just part of the background with when Jace and Izzy are around, and it's nice to see him as kind of like a main. And Magnus gets to see him like that, and obviously Magnus falls in love with him, and it's just, I love those guys so much. It was going to be like the worst date ever, but it turned into quite a good date. Quite a very good date actually, that they plan to see each other again. And it's just, I love it so much, guys. I have a lot of feelings about this that I can't put into words, and I'm not going to try, because it's just going to, imagine this is just a rambling mess anyway. But I have a lot of feelings, so talk to me, guys. Please let me know in the comments below anything and everything that you thought about the Bane Chronicles. Obviously be mindful of people who haven't read it, but seriously guys, talk to me. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.